And today we're going to talk about how and why I make egg food. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Javiary. Today's video is actually the first time I'm updating an old video. And today we're going to talk about how and why I make egg food. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Javiary. Today we're going to update an old video which is about how and why I make egg food. First, we'll talk about the why. Basically what I'm doing with egg food is increasing my birds' access to protein, calories, nutrients, and the abundance of food that they would need in nature for two specific periods primarily. And those two periods are molting and then breeding season. So just like in the wild in breeding season, I'm trying to recreate the abundance of available food that helps them grow and raise chicks. And all these ingredients that you see here help me to do that. So let's go ahead and list out ingredients. So first of all, kind of the egg food, the base would be eggs. So I've pre-hard boiled these eggs. I had them in the fridge and they've soaked up a little bit of the color from the pearl morbide, which is another thing I use. This is basically a substitute for sprouted seed. And I use this instead of sprouted seed because with sprouted seeds you can potentially run into some issues, especially if it goes bad, which it can do quickly. So this is basically a freeze-dried version, and you mix it 2 parts one part this Dippin' Dots type stuff, and it looks like this when it's ready to go in, and the birds love it. Obviously hard-boiled eggs, and then the other things I use, I always add a little bit of powdered kelp meal. You can get it from various places. It's basically an iodine supplement. After the iodine supplement, another thing that I always add is Hagen Tropimix. Now, Tropimix, it's a great product. It's basically an egg food mix all on its own. It's made by Hagen, and it can be fed as an enrichment food, which is kind of basically what I use egg food for, to all kinds of birds. I find that it's a little bit big in its natural packaged form for my birds, so I have already done this, but I put it in this blender. And I don't blend it completely, as you can see, but I blend a lot of it and kind of make it more into an egg food, a dry egg food powder to mix in. I also like to add in, especially during breeding season, leftover eggshells. So anytime I make eggs or my wife makes eggs, I get the shells and save them, and then I can add them back in. Another thing I like to add, and this is especially helpful if you're keeping birds outdoors, is this African seed called Fonio paddy. You can get it a lot of different places, but there have been studies that this wild growing seed basically eliminates coccidiosis. So I like to mix that in as well. And then, especially if you have birds that like fruit and things like that, I like to add in some Lori pellets, just a little bit. I like the color, and I like providing a little bit of fructose to the finches. And then, depending on what I'm doing, a couple of days a month, at least, really once a week at least, I like to do a clay cow supplement in with the egg food. I've talked about clay cow before, but it's a bentonite clay supplement. In the wild, birds would absorb clay and eat clay in a process called geophagy. I can't pronounce it, but it's geophagous behavior. And basically they would, naturally eat some clay to help remove toxins from their gut, creates a healthy gut flora, and it's got calcium. And if I'm not going to use the clay cow, which is the majority of the time, I will use Hari Prime, which is a vitamin, mineral, and amino acid supplement. Because again, we're just trying to make these birds healthier. So let's get to work. The first thing I've got to do is peel these eggs, which when I peel them, I'll remove the shell, discard the membrane on the inside, and then I'll have just the actual shell and the eggs left. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so I've sliced up the egg and the yolk. You see the shell, and I just crush it like this. While I'm doing that, I'll explain more about my philosophy here. So I tend to think of feeding birds like the throttle on a car, so like your gas pedal. And my theory is during the periods where the birds need high caloric intake, which is basically breeding season for me, I want to do things to press on the gas. So egg food and live insects every day is gas pedal all the way down. Now during the molting period, I do still want them to get some extra calories and extra nutrients, so I feed egg food every other day or every third day, so sort of halfway. And then during the resting period, I pull all the way back, so I'm at like idle, and they're not getting anything. So like the car is stopped at a stoplight. And that's basically how I handle when and why to give egg food. So once I've finished crushing all this up, I'll do the next thing, which is to add in the pearl moorbead. Okay, now that I've got this dumped out, you can kind of see the consistency of it. I'll dump in the rest of my extra eggshells. And then, again, just like before, we're just mixing it up. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not getting reviewed at a restaurant or something. You just want everything to have a good mix and be spread out. And once I've completed this, then the next step is, this is when I'll add my nutrient powder. So in this case, the Hari Prime. Okay, so like I said, Prime, which you can find in my Amazon store, is a vitamin, mineral, and amino acid supplement. There's dosing instructions right here. So for small birds, we're looking at half a cc, but this is a batch that will actually last me about 9 days, and each bird's only going to get a little bit. So it looks like kind of like dehydrated ice cream or powder there. So I'm going to give it a pretty liberal, I'm going to spill some on the table, but give it a pretty liberal covering with that, and then back to the same thing, stirring, and then we'll add in the fonio patty, or first we'll add the kelp meal, which we can actually go ahead and do now too. And then we'll stir it all up, and we'll add in the fonio patty. Now that we've got the prime and the kelp meal stirred in, we add fonio patty, which, like I said, it's a Central African seed. This is just a wild seed, and this is pre-shelled, but it eliminates coccidiosis naturally. And anytime I can put in something that isn't a medication that also adds calories and helps keep the birds healthy, that is a good deal. All right, I've got the fonio patty mixed in. So now I add the Hagen Tropimix dry egg food. Mix that in, and then the last thing we'll add is the Lori food, and then it will be ready to put into jars and freeze. All right, let's add in the Lori pellets, and I made a little, it's hard to see on camera, but I made a little pocket here because these things like to bounce around. I'll mix this in, and then we'll put it in jars. People ask me, how long will it be good for? I generally make about 9-10 days at a time and freeze it, but I believe it would be good for much longer than that. And then, I freeze it in a little container like this, and then one container like this feeds all my birds. There's some other things you could add to your egg food besides clay cal, if you were so inclined. If you have birds that aren't used to it, that like to eat, that aren't used to eating egg food, you could add oregano. Is a thing that can help them. I've added freeze-dried bloodworms and things like that for the insectivorous birds before. So it really is it's basically a bird salad, and you can make it how it works for you. Just want to show you how I make it. This is what I do, and My birds are used to it. They'll be waiting every morning at the front of the aviary for me to provide the egg food. So that's really it. It's a great way to easily increase your bird's nutrition, keep them healthy, and help to produce larger clutches and healthier birds through the molt. And again, as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put a comment below. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask me via DM on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks, Flock, for flying along with me.
Birds in the sky keeping me down. They won't let me inside of their town. How I wish I could be one of them. How I wish I could be one of